The latest tech.
People love iPhone, and it's an important part of our daily lives.
Interviews.
You see far too many products that come on the market that you look at that you say, was a blind person ever even consulted for something like this?
Accessibility.
The most interesting thing over the last couple of years is the emphasis on gaming and accessibility.
This is Double Tap TV.
Welcome to the program. I am Marc Aflalo.
And I'm Stephen Scott.
Stephen, you know accessibility is one of those things in tech that's often stumbled upon accidentally.
Yeah, that's true. But, I think what it also shows is how universal accessibility is. I actually think that one of the challenges when it comes to accessibility is the name itself. As I've often thought, I wonder if you changed the name to something like universal control or personalization, people might start to think about accessibility differently. Because ultimately, that's what it is, there's a universality about it, that essentially you can use this no matter whether you can see or hear or feel. We're all able to use this technology and use those features to accommodate in whatever way is required. But equally, there's that personalization factor. And a great example of that is dark mode, which is something a lot of people use these days as a way of just, having a darker background to work in music studios or working in lower light at nighttime. Coders especially love that, those people who sit programming all day in the dark. For those people, it can be really good. But also for people who have low vision, it can make such a difference as well. And that is where a lot of these features often come from. They come from the world of accessibility, but they become adopted by the mainstream, and I'm all for that.
Yeah, there's so many features that fall under accessibility, yet these features, aren't necessarily just intended for people with disabilities. If I look at my iPhone, for example, here, under accessibility, there's everything from the obvious ones, voiceover, zoom, text sizes, to motion blur, audio description, touch attention, voice control, hearing devices, sound recognition, and the list goes on and on. It's almost, like it feels like there's no natural spot for it. So manufacturers and software designers just kind of stick it in accessibility.
It is, and there are two schools of thought on this. I tend to lean towards the one which says universal design is good. And I think we should talk in those terms as well. Because, essentially if it's designed for everyone, that's good, right? Who can argue with that? But there is another school of thought, which I can see the point of view here, which is let's not detract from or distract from disability itself, which is really important. Let's not forget the fact that disability does have its own requirements. When I think about disability in terms of blindness, no matter how hard you try to make Braille something that's universal, it's never going to be. The only people that are ever going to use Braille are blind people, truthfully. So it's never going to be something that is going to be any more than a specialist piece of tech in our world, but a very important part of our world. And I think when you talk about universality, you can very quickly move away from the idea of Braille. Because let's say you think about talking computers. So, I have a computer and it can talk and I can listen to all my information, so why would I need Braille, right? Well, that does happen. That conversation does happen, and it has happened, especially in educational circles. You've got to be careful with that. When you start to see the move away from Braille and towards talking computers, that can be detrimental. So, two schools of thought on this. I think a mix of both is absolutely the answer. Ultimately, you want to have a design for everyone approach to everything, but you don't want to exclude people as a result of that either.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you in terms of kind of renaming it, because when people say accessibility, there's unfortunately this tend to, flip the channel or saying, oh, that's not relevant to me, but that universal design, that language, I think makes a lot more sense. And you find that anytime you see an interview with anybody talking about accessibility, it comes down to really letting anybody be able to experience the same thing equally across the board. That's what it is. It's whether you're blind, no matter what your disability is, or your ability, it's allowing you and everybody else to experience something on equal footing. That's all it is.
Well, the right language here is code, okay? So the right language is code. It's not a language in and of itself, it's a code. So essentially it's another way to read the English language. And of course, it's available in many other languages as well.
You bring up something interesting there with Braille, but I look at Braille just like another language, right? It's another language that people could, toggle on if they happen to be bilingual, for example.
Yeah, I love that. That is exactly what this is about. And it's kind of how I got started in this whole world of technology and broadcasting and doing shows like this, because, I wanted to showcase how mainstream technology stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think could be used by a disabled person could be. And this sounds like something that, this person is trying to do as well.
You teach me something every week, Stephen. This is why I love being here. Today we're going to be talking and introducing you to a young woman who likes to advocate for what we call accidental accessibility. She leaned on technology to get herself through school and of course, looks at accessibility features as almost a companion to her daily life.
Absolutely. I think the language is becoming clearer in this, which is good. Copilot is a great example of that. And I think that, when you think about, say, for example, a screen reader, or you think about the voice assistants that we use each day through our Amazon Echo, for example, or whatever it might be, they are companions. They are devices that can assist, and we see them that way. And that's how they've been talked about for a long time. Copilot, though, is a better explanation of how AI is performing today because it's smarter. It's more than just an assistant. It's not just going to give you the time. It's going to do a lot more than that. When you think about your smart assistant, that's how you might use it. But you know what? A Copilot is going to be able to, help you with something quite technical, something a bit more involved. And that is essentially what the AI side is offering. And I think this is going to extend in the future in a really interesting way. And I know this isn't maybe a conversation for today, but I do think this is going to take us in a really interesting way towards a new style of accessibility going forward, which I'm very excited about. It's something I talk about in my daily Double Tap show, which you can find on AMI Audio every day. But honestly, it's something I'm really excited about because I think AI is going to change, it's going to change the whole world for everybody, isn't it? But I think when it comes to accessibility, I think we're going to see some massive leaps forward and a much more assistant-led approach like you're talking about, which is brilliant.
Stephen, before we jump to a quick break, I want to throw out a little disclaimer there because the guest that is coming up, her name is Alexa Huth. So you may not want to listen or watch this episode next to your Amazon Echo smart speaker, or maybe turn that microphone off just for the next 20 minutes or so. But we'll try not say her name too many times. That being said, let's take a quick break and we're going to come back with Alexa after this.
You're watching Double Tap TV. Get involved. Follow us at Double Tap On Air or email us feedback@doubletaponair.com. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
We're back on Double Tap TV now with our guest Alexa Huth. Alexa, thank you for joining us on the program today. Tell us a little bit about your background and your diagnosis.
When I was 21 to 22, I was in grad school, and it was an intense program. So I was a lot of reading. I was getting my master's in professional writing, looking at documents all day, hand editing on the computer, and I started to see green. And nobody tells you when you're losing a sense what it should look like, what it should feel like. And so I just assumed I was studying too hard. I just finished my bachelor's, went straight into a master's program at Carnegie Mellon, and there was a lot of reading involved. So as I'm seeing green, I'm thinking, well, you're just studying really hard, but you're getting your degree, just keep going. But what I didn't realize was that I was talking to my mother and my sister about it pretty frequently. And I guess it was running in the back of my mind that something really was wrong. And I just wasn't really absorbing it myself. So I turned in one of my finals and my mom said, okay, now go straight to the doctor. And I did, because when your mother is that insistent on something, you should probably do it. And I went, and the doctor that I had been seeing, she had found a small hole in my retina that August, and this was December. And she said, it's fine, it should probably close up, no problem. And then when I went back, she said, nothing really, just you're going to see a specialist on Monday. This was a Friday. And she referred me to a specialist on Monday. And so I had a sense that something was wrong, but I didn't know quite how wrong until I went to the specialist's office and it was filled with people. And it was clear that they had made me an emergency appointment. And so I was going through the kind of process of getting my retinas tested. And there was a moment where one of the nurses came in and she was testing my field of vision, and she was doing, can you see my fingers over here and over here? And I kept looking. And she said, don't look forward. Can you see this? And I kept having to look. And it didn't click for me in that moment, but later I realized that's when I should have known that my peripheral vision was not there anymore. But again, nobody tells you what that's supposed to look or feel like. And so then they put me into different rooms, and they had progressively more senior surgeons coming in, and then they had a visiting doctor come in, and I've had other medical problems before. When they bring other people in to look at you, you're probably a case that's of interest. So that was my biggest red flag, I think. And that's how I learned that my retinas had both detached. And so that was on Monday, and the surgeon said he was operating on Friday.
Wow, that's definitely intense. Did you understand at the time what that really meant?
I had a trip to Scotland planned, and so I tried to fight it because I didn't really know what was happening until, they come in with a pamphlet and they say, this is what's going on. And so I was trying to say, well, can't I travel? Isn't this? And they said, this is a degenerative disease. This has progressed. And indicated, although the memories are a little bit foggy because it was a very intense day. My parents were living in the Middle East and in Doha. I called my mother. My mother got on the phone with the surgeon, and that's when I heard basically that my eyes were either going blind or something to that effect. And that's when it hit me. That's when I knew what was really going on. So everything leading up to that was vague, and I was still trying to say, no, I'm fine. But then when you hear that, that's the reality.
That's a lot. That's a lot to absorb. You have your surgery. Tell us how that went.
Unfortunately, that first surgery failed, which we can obviously talk about more if it's relevant. But I then had to go. I was in class one day and I started to see the curtain. It was the surgery on my right eye, realizing that it failed, finishing out that class, seeking out my mother and going to the emergency room and learning that we were going to have to start again. So at that point, I had to take leave from the grad program, get more surgeries, and then go back. So I ended up graduating. Everything started in 2009, and I ended up graduating in 2010. So on my resume, it doesn't look like there was a gap, but there was a gap.
So you finish your schooling and you start your career and you end up in Japan. Why Japan?
I started losing my eyesight in Pittsburgh, which is where I was born and raised and where I went to school. And when you are in kind of the ecosystem that you understand and you lose something like eyesight, it can be very frustrating. You can feel like, well, I know how this should work. Why isn't it still working that way? And that kept happening to me. I remember going to my parents' place and just sobbing because I was too tired to do the laundry because it was just too much. There were too many things. I knew how they should work. Why weren't they working that way? And so I wanted to live somewhere where I didn't understand how it should work. So I couldn't keep running up against the system of, well, I get it. Why isn't it happening for me? And so I applied to a different country every night. Romania, Spain, Japan, just a lot of places where I hadn't really been, didn't really know, and I didn't know the language. And Japan, a company in Japan made me the best offer. And so that's how I ended up there.
Wow, that's just insane. So now that we know a little bit about your backstory and understand where you're coming from, we want to dive into the tech element here. But let's take a quick break. We're in conversation with Alexa Huth. Back in a moment here on Double Tap TV.
Can't get enough Double Tap TV? Subscribe to the podcast and get your fill of Double Tap every day. Visit doubletaponair.com and follow us now. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
We're back on Double Tap TV in conversation with Alexa Huth, who, if you're just tuning in, we left off with her picking up and going to Japan, but throughout her experience of losing her vision, tech played a pretty significant role.
And we love talking about it. Now, you were lucky when it came to trying out different types of technology, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that experience.
I am lucky to have a father who is in the tech space and who was able to say, okay, these are some things that might help. Otherwise, I would have been very lost. And I did hit it at a really interesting time when iPads were newer. And so I was able to kind of have the flexibility to enlarge the text as I was looking at it and things like that. So with that, I would say it has to be fluid. You can't look for one solution and say, well, this is it. This is my solution. Because anybody with vision loss knows that it's not a one-day constant. My vision's different every day. And so some days I'm so light sensitive that looking at a phone hurts. And some days I'm good enough that I have to turn up the brightness so that I can read better.
But you were reluctant at first, right?
I really pushed myself to not use it, not intentionally. I just kept being stubborn and trying to say, okay, this is how it should work. Much like living in Pittsburgh versus moving. I was trying to force myself to live exactly as I had because I was 22, I was in grad school, and I was just going to keep doing it. And that wasn't the correct approach. So I started missing things when I was editing, and that if anybody who's had a typo before, even if you're not an editor, you know that feeling of, oh no, I can't believe I sent it out that way, let alone if it's your job not to send it out that way. And that was a point at which I had to admit to myself, you're not really seeing what you're looking at. It's akin to when you get a little bit sleepy and you're looking at a page and you think you're reading it, but you're not reading it. That's a little bit what it was feeling like.
So was there an aha moment where it clicked, tech can actually help me?
So I started working with, I had a Mac, and so I started working with their voiceover technology. So text-to-speech there became just such a game changer. It was huge because then I was hearing my words, and if I missed something, I heard it. And so that kind of robotic male voice became the voice in my head when I was working. And it becomes sort of a friend and a colleague and all of the things that you need. It's so much more than just having it be, oh, this is tech. It's a piece of you then, and it supports your work. And so that's why I'm just so grateful to the people that work on these things, because I think sometimes they think, oh, this is a feature, or this is cool, or like maybe 6 users will care about this, but it's life-changing. And so on that same token, though, sometimes they like to change the voices of the speakers. And one day I logged on and my usual colleague was not there anymore. It's like you've suddenly gotten fired and you're in a whole new job. So learning that new voice was very difficult for me. And I actually looked it up. I think it was Reddit. Somebody else said, why is this voice changed? And I felt good that it wasn't just me that was panicking because all of a sudden I had to work with this different thing.
Alexa, talk about accessibility as a whole here. Where do you see room for improvement?
I do think that we need to make so many more things intentionally accessible. Relying on it accidentally working for me is frustrating. And I'm sure it's frustrating for people who have less vision than I do. So,
anything specific?
Customization options that aren't hidden in accessibility menus. Just the ability to control any sort of virtual environment, digital space, without having to go through so many places, dig it up, and then find, oh, it's only 2 things that they'll give you. I'm extremely light sensitive, and controlling brightness would be so helpful in so many situations. Another thing would be some features are only internet enabled. So it's hard because sometimes when you don't have a strong data connection or you're not connected to the internet, well, what are you able to use? So it's kind of, there's an expectation that because people with disabilities, myself included, are pretty adaptable, I'd like to say. And we're used to kind of shifting things and going with the flow because things are always changing. There's kind of, well, we've done it for you. Yeah, take it, enjoy it. And it's like, no, that's not helpful. That's not what we need. We need people to understand that this isn't just, oh, I'm gifting you this experience. It's an experience we deserve. I deserve accessibility in my technology. Everyone does. And so with that, I think needs to come more of a concrete understanding of what that means and involving people with disabilities in creating the technology instead of just acting like we're being gifted 1 or 2 features, because that's not how it should be.
Yeah, I love that. And this is something we actually hear a lot about on the show because it makes sense, right? Like, how can you design and develop accessible features for the people with those needs without them being deeply involved in that process?
Yeah, because I definitely did not know how it felt to have vision loss until I started losing my vision. And I definitely don't know how it feels to be permanently fully blind. only temporarily. So I can't speak to that experience, just like somebody couldn't speak to mine. And so that kind of assumption that, oh, well, this is what the vision loss experience looks like from somebody who has never lost their vision is, I also, having OCD, I constantly see people, oh, it's an X, it's Y, it's Z, it's what I saw on TV, it's this. No, just, it's so wrong. People get it so wrong. And I understand these assumptions, but I also feel like at this point, we need to stop leading with those assumptions, and we really need to consult the people who are actually having the lived experiences. And I know that there are more calls for that, and I'm very happy to see that. Yeah. But as Meryl Evans, a wonderful deaf advocate, says, progress over perfection. We can't expect things to be perfect. We need to push for progress.
What a great ending. Alexa, thank you so much for joining us on Double Tap TV. It's been great meeting you.
Thank you.
That is Alexa Huth. What a story, Stephen. And what a great way to end the show. So on that note, thank you for tuning in. We will chat with you on the next episode of Double Tap TV.
Thanks for watching Double Tap. Send us your feedback to feedback@doubletaponair.com. Leave us a voicemail at 1-877-803-4567. Hosted by Marc Aflalo in Montreal and Stephen Scott in Glasgow. Producer Marc Aflalo. Editing and graphics Jordan Steeves. Voiceover Anna Vicino. Social media Wendy KAUFMAN. Integrated Described Video Specialist M. Williams. Supervising Producer Michelle Dudas. Manager Programming AMI TV Lizanne Gagne. Director Content Development and Production Karen Nye. VP Content Development and Operations John Melville. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2023 Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.